Thanksgiving is just 1 week away. Celebrity historian Raffi Andonian is back with a history lesson on the holiday, including what the Founding Fathers had at their feast. That's all coming up on Good Day NWA.
Next week for Thanksgiving, a lot of families will gather and give thanks. Celebrity historian Raffi Andonian is back to talk more about the tradition of Thanksgiving. Raffi, welcome back.
Welcome.
Of course, thank you. What a wonderful time to be grateful about things, right?
Yes,
absolutely. Yes. Thank you. Here's a question. I think we've teased this all morning long because we want to know the answer to this. But what did the Founding Fathers have to eat when they were feasting?
Well, for one, they had feasts that were really long by our standards. We're talking about 20 courses, 24 hours. That's right.
I'm in. Sign me up.
Me too.
And they started about 2 p.m. just like we do, you know, about that middle of the day. But they actually, that was normal for them to have dinner around that time because it took, well, they're not always eating 20 courses, but on the feast they might be eating 20 courses. But the kinds of food that they ate, a lot of the meats we would recognize, like chicken, lamb, pork, beef. But what's different is because they're making on the wood, it's not really a stove the way we know, but in a huge fire pit.
Right.
And because they don't have food preservation the way that we do, it's really greasy, it's really salty, it's overly seasoned, often even what we would consider overly sweet, you know, just adding way too much sugar to kinds of food. Really avoiding fruits and vegetables as much as possible because they're seen as not really desirable. So a lot of the founders, because of this diet, if you will, they ended up getting gout.
I was going to say gout.
Regular occurrence back then.
Yeah, I know, that is crazy. Was it salty because they used salt as a preservative without refrigeration?
Yes, so sometimes. So refrigeration, they don't have refrigeration, right? So if it was something that was a short-term preservation for 5-6 days, they can't do it. So they have to eat it. If you're doing long-term preservation, then you're going to use salt for long-term preservation. But adding salt to the food as they're preparing it is not necessarily a preservation thing. It's because I would say food, while it was maybe fresher then, because a lot of those animals were killed that day.
Right, wow.
Was also at the same time maybe in many ways blander then in the preparation, so they would really overly season, including overly salt.
Right, over salt, over sugar, throw in all kinds of seasonings. That's interesting, right?
Yeah, absolutely. A long meal, but a very different meal.
I don't even know what you would have for 20 courses. Were they big courses or were they like little
I would say,
finger foods?
I mean, they're actually pretty big. They're pretty big courses, but I mean, you're doing it over several hours is what you're doing, right? Partly because it's a different kitchen. They're in basically a giant fireplace. And by the way, almost everyone back then had some level of cooking. It wasn't just servants and slaves. It was also men and women. So, of course, there's varying degrees of labor amongst these groups of people, but everyone had some idea of cooking. And with these big fireplaces that you have, you're going to have some kind of limitation in how you can bring food out. That's why they're having to do it over several hours.
Is there any, do you know when it would have ended? Like if it started at 2 o'clock?
Maybe 5-6 p.m., something like that.
Man, 20 courses, Kremlman, in over a few hours.
I'm still trying to figure out, like, what am I eating?
Yes.
But you know what? When we all come together for Thanksgiving and the food is laid out, I'm always wondering, because I don't do a lot of the cooking, it always does seem like a lot to me anyway. And so, like, from a preparation standpoint, I'm like, man, this looks like a lot. So I can only imagine, you know, what they were experiencing back then.
Yes.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating is that, you know, it was different, you know, amongst the upper classes, like the founders who were mostly well off, and those who are working classes. For example, working classes, and even in a regular diet, are going to eat a lot more bread. The upper classes, they're not really eating bread.
Just meat, it sounds like.
So when you're having bread at the dinner table, you know, that's a mixture, right? You're having the feasts of the upper classes, but you're also having stuff that the working classes would have had with the bread.
Well, when was the first Thanksgiving?
You know, what's funny about that is that we don't really know. I mean, I would say there's a lot of debate about that. What most people think of is 1621 Plymouth, right? This is what you think of. I would say that's a little bit of a stretch because that's, you know, almost 200 years before the United States exists. I don't consider that the same thing as what we celebrate. Virginia has a claim. They claim in 1619 there was the settlers that came and said thank you. New Mexico and Texas have a claim, the Spanish settlers in 1598. But I count more what we did in the United States, and there's a couple different things you can point to. One is George Washington. He, in 1789, the first year that the United States implements the Constitution, declares, has a proclamation for Thanksgiving Day in late November. So it was up to each president to do it every year, all the way to Franklin Roosevelt. It wasn't until Abraham Lincoln that it became more regular. Thomas Jefferson, as president, actually refused to proclaim Thanksgiving because he said it's state-sponsored religion. I don't want to deal with it. He thought it violated the First Amendment. So you have different opinions amongst the presidents. Until 1940s or early 1940s, Congress passes a law that says, all right, everyone's going to do it at the same time. We're not going to constantly move it around. Because presidents also moved it around. It was moving around within November. So it was kind of messy if you think about it, especially for football games, which were starting to happen early 20th century. A lot of different things. So it was
and that's
really
an important part of Thanksgiving as well.
Christmas shopping too, depending on the Christmas shopping season. Sometimes there'd be a lobby that would say, let's move Thanksgiving earlier so we have a longer Christmas shopping season. So a lot of things are influencing it until we kind of settled it. So I would say the first Thanksgiving, maybe George Washington, but really I don't consider it until Franklin Roosevelt starts to establish it the way that we would recognize it today.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like that.
Raffi, thank you so much.